I left Afghanistan and studied in London. They got rid of my brother for using our real surname. I grew up hiding my surname as if it were a crime. On my Afghan passport, it simply said Safiullah, nothing more. There was no second name, no formal surname like the kids in England had. My mother said it was to protect us, that what we carried in our blood was something you shouldn't mention out loud, especially after what happened to my grandfather. I was a child, I didn't ask much, but I learned to stay quiet, to hide, to pretend. When we left Afghanistan, I was 13. It wasn't a movie-style escape. It was a slow, humiliating journey, full of temporary permits, filthy shelters, interrogations, and tears hidden behind my mother's long hair. My brother Farhad was 17. He was always the brave one, or the stubborn one, as Mom used to say. When we arrived in London, the first thing he wanted to do was say his full name out loud. Farhad Zahir Khan Safiullah. He shouted it at the entrance of the school we were assigned to. It was his way of telling the world they hadn't erased him, that he was still someone, that we were still part of a bigger story. But here, no one knew what that surname meant. Not the kids who bullied us, not the teachers who struggled to pronounce it, not even me, who barely understood why my mother would turn pale every time she heard him say it. Years later, I understood. My grandfather had been a tribal commander, one of the few who opposed alliances with the Soviets in the 80s and later with the Taliban. He made enemies everywhere. His name, our name, was both a flag and a target. My mother never told me directly. I pieced it together over time, from half-finished conversations, Pashto phrases that stopped when I entered the room, frozen looks when letters arrived from the Afghan consulate in London. But Farhad knew. He always knew. And still, he used the name as if it were a talisman. My first vivid memory in London was a punch to the face. We'd been at school for 2 weeks, and a British kid, Jamie, pushed me in the cafeteria. He said I smelled weird, that I probably came from a country where people ate sand. I stood up for myself. I told him at least I knew where my father was. Big mistake. The next day, they cornered me. 3 of them beat me up. 1 recorded a video. Farhad didn't ask me anything. He just saw my face and showed up at school the next day with an open cut on his eyebrow and his uniform covered in dirt. He had found the kid from the video. He made him pay for it. The principal suspended him. Mom nearly fainted. But Farhad didn't apologize. He just hugged me that night and said, "Never hide who you are, even if you have to bleed for it." That was my brother. The years passed. He became a kind of youth leader among the Afghans in our neighborhood. He organized a boxing club, workshops for the younger kids, even convinced a local councilman to fund a small community center. They called it Casa Zahir. I, on the other hand, hid among books. I studied all I could, earned scholarships, and at 19, I got into King's College to study international relations. It was a subtle way of researching who we were without raising alarms. But I still signed everything as Safiullah. Nevermore. Farhad, on the other hand, used the full name. He put on flyers, on public petitions. He appeared on social media, talking about the diaspora, about rights, about the dignity of the past. They erased us back there, he told me once. Are we going to erase ourselves here too? The night everything changed was a Thursday. It was raining. I was at the library, finishing an essay on Central Asia's tribal structures. When my phone rang, I saw his name, but didn't answer. I owed him a call from the weekend. There were 11 missed calls and 1 voice message. I listened to it only because I couldn't concentrate. "Brother, don't come home tonight. It's not safe." They saw me. They said the name on the street. Safiullah Zahir Khan. Just like that, the full name. I don't know how they found out. Mom heard it too. She's trembling. "Don't come. Stay away." My heart stopped. I didn't understand. Who had seen him? What name had they said? I caught a train, ran the 6 blocks from the station. And when I turned the corner onto our street, I saw the police lights, the shouting, the yellow tape. And my mother on the ground, her scarf undone, crying like she was breaking apart from the inside. My brother wasn't there. Just his jacket hanging from the fence. And stains. So many dark stains. The official version was vague. Unidentified assault. Violent attack. Suspects still at large. They gave us a case number. And silence. But I knew it wasn't random. The surname. The damn surname. My mother didn't speak for weeks. She only looked at me and held my hand like she never wanted to let go. She slept in my bed. I didn't sleep at all. I searched. I asked around. I called Farhad's friends. There were rumors. People had seen him arguing with 2 men days before. One with an Arab accent, the other British. Others said Casa Zahir had received threats by mail. But no one knew anything. But didn't want to say. Then a week after the funeral, behind closed doors, with barely 6 people, a letter arrived. It wasn't signed. No return address. But it was addressed to me. It only said, "One fell for speaking." Are you going to be next? I took it to the police. They said it could be a joke, a generic threat. They couldn't do anything without more evidence. But I already knew. I couldn't hide anymore. Not with Mom, like a shadow in the house. Not with Farhad's jacket still in my closet. Not with a surname burning on my lips. So I said it. I said it in class, at a public forum. I said our full name. I said what happened to my brother. I said that if someone was watching, I was waiting for them. And that's when the messages started. First on social media, then in the mailbox, then in person. A woman in a black veil who whispered, "Watch your tongue," in the library. An envelope with a photo of Farhad as a child, playing with me. And then the worst. A call. A man's voice with a northern Afghan accent. Cold. Calculated. "Your brother spoke of honor. You speak of justice. But you both forget one thing, Zahir. Names are not inherited. They are punished." He hung up. I went home, locked the door. And in that silence, I knew this wasn't over. It wasn't just about Farhad. It was our story, our blood, our past. And if they wanted to erase it again, they'd have to go through me. The next morning, the door of my apartment was marked with red paint. It wasn't a common symbol. It was a message. One only those familiar with certain stories could understand. And then I knew I wasn't alone in London. They were here too, and they knew where I lived. It was a cross, drawn in red paint. Not perfect, not religious. More like an X, like crossing out something that no longer has value. I saw it at dawn when I went out to get the newspaper I never read, just out of habit. The London air was humid, sticky, that mix of fog and old smoke creeping between the brick buildings. And there it was, on my door, on my home. No words were needed. It was an ancient message. In northern Afghanistan, my mother used to say marking someone's house was the same as declaring it a war zone. I closed the door slowly, as if making noise could make things worse. Mom was already awake. She hadn't slept since we lost Farhad. She lit candles at dawn, knitted things she never finished, or simply sat in the dark with her rosary in hand. "They saw it," she said without turning around as she sat me next to her in the living room. "Now they know you live alone. They mark you the way you mark a stray dog." I stayed silent. "What do you want me to do, Mom?" "Hi." She closed her eyes. "I want you to stay alive." I called the landlord, asked to change the lock. He said he'd do it next week. He didn't. I called the university, asked for help moving into student housing. The waiting list was 3 months. The assistant who answered sounded robotic and said, "If you feel your life is in danger, you can call 999 or go to a medical center." They didn't understand. This wasn't a normal assault. It wasn't a visible threat. It was something deeper, an invisible hunt. I returned to Casa Zahir after a month of being shut down. I still had the keys. The entrance was covered in torn papers, and someone had written "terrorist" on the window with white paint. I walked in with a knot in my stomach. The smell hit me first. Dampness, dust, abandonment. The small room where my brother held English classes was littered with scattered flyers. The walls, once covered with pictures of smiling children, were bare. They had ripped them down. At the back, I found his desk. His teacup, still half dirty. And his notebook. I opened it. Page after page, filled with names. Names of young Afghans. Addresses. Help contacts. Handwritten political notes. And on the last page, a name underlined. H.N. Karamzada. I had never heard of him, but it was underlined 3 times. Next to it, a phrase written in Pashto. "He who breaks the chain will become the snake." I called Ahmad, an old friend of Farhad. He was a heavy-set guy, sunken eyes, always looked like he hadn't slept well. He answered from a market in Southall, with music and merchants shouting in the background. "Where are you?" I asked. "Near Ealing." "What happened, brother? You okay? I need to talk. In person. It's about Farhad." And a name. Karamzada. The silence on the other end lasted 2 seconds, but it felt like a minute. "Come tomorrow, but not to my house. There's a cafe near the station. It's called Norchai House. 10 o'clock. The morning was cloudy, like almost always in London. I put on one of Farhad's old jackets, one of those with the wool collar he wore when he wanted to look older. I put it on without thinking, but the weight on my shoulders made me shiver. Norchai House was small, barely 4 tables. The smell of cardamom, old wood, hot tea. Ahmad was already there, drinking pistachio chai. He greeted me with a dry handshake, eyes evasive. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. Resignation. "Who is H.N. Karamzada?" I asked bluntly. He sighed, then lowered his voice. He was a minor commander. Very minor. From Kunduz. He switched sides several times. Farhad reported him. Not publicly, but in a letter to an international aid group. Said Karamzada was recruiting kids in refugee camps. Said he had proof. And what happened? They erased him from the records. Claimed he didn't exist. But a few months ago, Someone saw him in London. I grabbed my chest. You're saying he's here? I'm saying you're not paranoid. That name in the notebook is a warning. Farhad knew he was close. Why didn't he tell me? Because he was protecting you. He always did. That night, I didn't go home. I walked for hours, from Ealing to Hyde Park. London felt unfamiliar, like it was watching me. Every shadow was a threat. Every crossing, a trap. I sat on a bench by the Serpentine Lake. The water's reflections looked like blades. I remembered a conversation with Farhad years ago. Why don't you let go? I asked him, why do you keep using the surname? He looked at me with anger and love. Because if I don't, it dies. Names only live if someone says them. And now, I was the last one left. I returned home at dawn. The red mark was still there. But someone had left something else. A package, not big, wrapped in brown paper. No sender. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a photo. My mother, young, with my father, and on the back, written in black ink. All cons and the same. Do you still want to be one of them? I went up to my room, closed the door, and started writing. First, the names. The ones from Farhad's notebook. Then the events. The letters. The dates. After that, I searched for Karamzada in every public database I could find. He didn't exist, but I found a match in a local Barking newspaper, a minor article about a community negotiator named Hakim Nurzid. Blurry photo, but the eyes, they were identical. And in the comments below the article, someone had written, how many more children, Karamzada? I knew I had found him. The decision was clear. Stay quiet. Or do what Farhad did, what he couldn't finish. That same night, I created a fake profile and posted the full name Hakim Nurzid Karamzada on an Afghan forum in English. I left details, questions, and my contact email. The next morning, I had 5 replies. One of them simply said, I saw him. He's not just a man. He's a network. And attached to the message, a photo of him smiling with a child. A child who looked exactly like I did at 8 years old. I stared at it for minutes without moving. The boy in the photo had no name. He stood next to Hakim Nurzid, the man who used to be Karamzada, and smiled with squinted eyes, like kids do when they don't know they're being used. He wore a Chelsea t-shirt and held a notebook in his hands. The background was gray, a concrete structure without windows. One of those makeshift schools and refugee camps. But that wasn't what froze me. It was Hakim's smile. It wasn't a smile. It was a rehearsed grimace. The same one Farhad used when teaching us how to blend in the UK. That neutral British expression that hides the fangs. The other replies were more vague. Be careful what you know. Don't confront him alone. He has protection. But one stood out. I know you. You're Farhad Khan's brother. He came to me before. He had proof. We were supposed to meet. He never showed up. It was signed by someone with the alias Azra. I replied immediately. Her email was private, but the domain belonged to an Afghan women's organization in exile. I looked them up online. They had a small office in Camden. I went that same afternoon. Camden town was full of life. Tattoo shops, curry stalls, electronic music blasting from a store with broken windows. But turning down a narrow street, everything changed. Gray houses, no color in sight. I found the address. A white door between a Polish supermarket and a closed hair salon. Knock, knock. A woman in her 40s opened, hair covered with a red scarf. Sharp gaze. Smelled of incense. You are? I'm Farhad's brother. Khan. She said nothing. Let me in. The walls were covered with photos of missing women, letters in mixed languages, and a faded Afghan flag hanging in a corner. Azra isn't my real name, she said as she offered me tea. But that doesn't matter. What matters is your brother trusted me. And that obliges me to tell you the truth. What happened? She sat down, crossed her legs, and took a long sip from her cup. Karamzada didn't come to London alone. He was invited by a network, ghost organizations, groups pretending to help refugees, but only laundering money and favors. He runs one of those programs. And the children, they use them. Fake documents, altered identities. Kids who disappear. I stayed silent. The air grew heavier. Did Farhad have evidence? Yes, but he became reckless. He told me he had a contact in the Ministry of the Interior. He was going to hand everything over. He sent me a message that night. If I don't come back, follow the line of the boy with the patch. He looked at me intently. Does that mean anything to you? I nodded slowly. Yes. That boy is in the photo. I left that office trembling. Azra gave me a USB drive. It was password protected, but she said my brother would know how to open it. I went home, locked myself in. I remembered something. When we were kids, Farhad and I had a silly game. We wrote messages using a mix of Pashto and made-up words. We had a code. Vowels were replaced by numbers, and final consonants were swapped with Greek letters. Ridiculous. Childish. I opened the USB. The password, F2RH4DOMEGAK. It worked. Inside were photos, scanned documents, short videos. In one of them, recorded on a cell phone, Hakeem could be seen entering a room with several men, all with passports on the table. One said, UK humanitarian aid. In another video, there was a boy, his left eye bandaged. The one with the patch. His voice was soft, trembling. But he said something clear. I don't want to go back. They do things to me. He yells that we're property. The next morning, I was followed. They weren't very discreet. Two men, one in a blue cap, the other in a leather jacket. They walked behind me when I left the subway. I saw them reflected in a shoe store window. I crossed the street 3 times. So did they. I ran. I slipped into a university cafe and didn't come out for hours. By nightfall, I went to my mother's house. I didn't want to sleep alone. She welcomed me with a look that no longer asked questions. She made me rice with lentils, like when I was a child. I didn't eat. Told you, didn't I? She murmured. You can't escape the surname. Not even by crossing oceans. That night, I dreamed of my father. He was at the border with a rusty weapon and a radio that only gave off static. He called for Farhad, then for me. He said, protect the name, or it will become a cage. I woke up with my heart racing. In the morning, I decided to return to Casa Zahir one last time. Not out of nostalgia, but because it was the only place where Farhad wrote without fear. Maybe there was something else left. The door had been forced open. I stepped in carefully. The shelves were overturned, papers scattered. But in the back, behind the improvised classroom, there was a small cabinet with a false bottom. I found it by accident. I kicked it, and it sounded hollow. I opened it. An envelope. Inside, a printed photo of an Afghan girl in a school uniform, smiling. On the back, in blue ink, it said, she is the last. Hakeem will deliver her in 2 weeks. Day 15. Eurostar Terminal. Paris. My skin crawled. There was time, and I had proof, but I was also afraid. I called Azra. Told her what I'd found. Silence. Don't go alone. Don't trust anyone. That girl is being moved like merchandise. If you interrupt that, you become a target. I already am. The 2 weeks that followed were hell. Every day, I felt like I was being followed. Once I found a new phone in my backpack. I'd never seen it. I left it on a random train. Another night, someone knocked on my door, and when I opened, there was no one there. Just a note. Your brother broke the rules. You decide if you want to end the same. I slept with a chair blocking the door. Mom looked at me like she knew I was preparing a farewell. If you don't come back, what should I do with your clothes? Give them to someone who needs them. But keep Farhad's notebook. Keep it for yourself. She nodded. And then came day 15. Eurostar. St. Pancras Station. London. I wore a cap, sunglasses, a reversible jacket. Everything I'd learned from watching Farhad. Blend in. Don't stand out. Through the glass windows, I saw movement. Escorts. 2 black cars. A tall man with a briefcase. And next to him, a little girl. Hair tied back. Formal clothes. Lifeless eyes. It was her. Hakeem was with them. In a suit. Serious. A perfect mask. The train to Paris left in 12 minutes. I couldn't think. Only act. I moved through the crowd. Pretended to make a call. Got as close as I could. And then a boy yelled behind me. Dad, look, it's him. The one from the TV. Everyone turned. Including Hakeem. He looked at me. He recognized me. His expression twisted, but he didn't lose composure. He muttered something to a guard. The girl was led toward the train car. I ran, but just before I reached her, I felt a hand on my neck, and everything went black. I woke up in a room with no windows. Neither cold nor hot. Just gray. In front of me, Hakeem. Alone. No security. Your brother was a romantic. You seem more stupid. He smiled. Want to know the funniest part? He leaned closer. That girl, she's from your family. But she's not the last. And then, he showed me a folder. And the first photo was mine. From when I was a child. I woke up not knowing how much time had passed. I was in a windowless room. The walls were smooth concrete, without cracks or shadows. The only sound was the distant hum of some ventilation system. My neck ached and my tongue was dry, as if I hadn't had water in hours. I sat up with difficulty. I was sitting on a metal chair, unbound, but my whole body felt heavy. In front of me, a simple table. On it, a manila folder and a glass of water. And then, a door opened. Hakeem walked in with slow, meticulous steps. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie. No assistance, no social shield. Just him, the raw truth behind the disguise. Are you comfortable? He said in a low voice, almost cordial. I didn't answer. He sat in front of me with a calmness that chilled me to the bone. Then he pushed the folder toward me. Look at what your brother didn't live to understand. I didn't open it. He did it for me. The first image stopped my heart, me. At 8 years old, in a temporary shelter in Kandahar. Long hair, skinny, dirty, but clearly me. I was wearing a yellow t-shirt with a giraffe, a donation from UNICEF. You're part of the inventory, brother, Hakeem said with a dry smile. You were cataloged, classified, exported. Like all the others, my stomach turned, but I couldn't look away. These were internal files. Names, dates, transit codes, poorly translated Afghan names into British or French identities. Many were crossed out in red ink. Relocated. Lost. Voluntary. Why are you doing this? I managed to ask in a faint voice. Hakeem leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms. Because the world doesn't run on pretty truths. It runs on systems. Exchanges. We keep the machinery going. You and your brother played martyrs. Idealists. But nobody wants idealists. Not even you. I hated him. But more than that, I hated myself for understanding what he meant. The girl? I asked. He smiled. Coldly. She's where she's supposed to be. With a family that paid a lot for her. A family prepared to give her what her homeland couldn't. Sound familiar? Yes. Because I'd lived it. It won't work this time, I told him firmly. I have copies. Videos. Names. And if I don't come back, everything gets released. His smile faded. For the first time, he looked tired. We've already taken care of that. They took me outside without saying another word. I got into a dark car, unmarked, and they dropped me off in an alley in North London at dawn. I had my phone. No notifications. No emails. Nothing. But the folder was gone. I went back home. My mother opened the door with red eyes, as if she hadn't slept. She didn't ask anything. Just hugged me, tight, as if by doing so, she could stop the world from swallowing me whole. The following days, I moved like a machine. Ate little. Slept badly. I was haunted by shadows. But they weren't physical. They were unanswered questions. What there were more. One night, I got a message from an unknown number. It only said, she escaped. Gare de Lyon Station. Children's waiting room. Come alone. My blood froze. I flew to Paris that same night. Paid in cash. Blended in. My brain acted without needing instructions. The station was a mess of tourists and trains. I looked for the children's area. There, between two armchairs, I saw her. It was her. The girl. Small. Dirty. Trembling. Holding a teddy bear in her hands. She looked at me, and without saying a word, she ran toward me. I hugged her tightly. She didn't cry. She just held on to me like she knew there could be no more mistakes. Do you have a name? I whispered. Shabnam. Shabnam. Like my father's aunt. Like the stories he used to tell on the border on nights without light. Escaping was chaos. We slept on trains. Walked through villages. Crossed into northern Italy in the back of a pickup truck. Not out of strategy. Out of desperation. I took her to a convent near Como. Called them from a fake number. Explained part of it. Not all. Just enough. They agreed to care for her for a few days. Before I left, she grabbed my hand. Were you like me too? I couldn't answer. I just gave her Farhad's notebook. With a photo of the two of us from when we weren't products yet. When we believed our last name was a shield. I returned to London. I wanted to face the system. I wanted to report everything, but it was all clean. The addresses had changed. The emails were gone. Azra had left. Casa Zahir was shut down. The digital files completely erased. It was as if nothing had ever happened. So I was left with the only thing I had. Memory and the story. And now, I write it here on this forgotten forum of the internet. Not to demand justice. Not to seek fame. But so there's a record that this happened. That my brother was real. That he fought. And that I at some point did too. But there's something else. 3 nights ago, I received a box on my doorstep. No sender. Inside, there was only a photo. Hakeem. Stripped of power. Head down. In a gray room. With one word written on the back, in Pashto. Fallen. And now I wonder, who else is watching?